This program was paid for by the friends and partners of Jeff Struecker Ministries. Welcome to Jeff Struecker Ministries. Jeff spent most of his adult life serving his country as an Army Ranger in countless combat missions. For his leadership and sacrifice, Jeff was inducted into the Army Ranger Hall of Fame. And then, God called Jeff to a new mission. Now, Jeff is passionately dedicated to guiding men and their families into a real, rugged, and relentless faith in King Jesus. And now, here's warrior and pastor, Jeff Struecker.
Preach in 3, 2, 1.
Bill had a great family. He had a great job. He had a great future in front of him. I mean, on the surface, everything looked great for Bill. And then he got a headache. Now, he's early in his 30s. He's in the prime of his life. He's very healthy. He's very fit, so no big deal, right? Except that this headache doesn't go away after day 2. And then after day 3, something really weird happens, this mind-splitting headache, and then parts of his body start to go numb. And that's when Bill realized something really bad is going on right now. So Bill went to the hospital, early 30s, and what the doctors told him is you just had a stroke, and you shouldn't be alive right now. They ran a whole series of tests to try to figure out what was going on, and the doctors were really struggling. How can a guy at your age and in your health with this much going on in life, how can somebody like that have a stroke? And then Bill had another one. And that's when the doctor said, hold on now, this is really, really serious. And by this point, we can diagnose what's going on, Bill, but we can't stop it. And then before he turned 36 years old, Bill had his third stroke. And the doctor said, if you have another one, and there's nothing that anybody can do to stop it, if you have another one, it will kill you. There's no way around it. I had a chance to talk to Bill almost 2 years ago. Bill Gassiama said, one of the best things in life that ever happened to me is I got to this moment after the third stroke, and I had to radically re-examine my life. In fact, Bill said, I'm a totally different guy today. Bill's life was a sham. Yeah, he had the job, he had the cars, he had the house, he had the wife, he had all of the money, but it was all a sham. And here's what I want you to know before we dig into the Bible today. Life is far more than money and cars and house and job. It's even more than food on the table. All of that stuff is shiny, but it doesn't really satisfy. In fact, what I want you to know is only Jesus can create this bright, beautiful life on the inside. Everybody is striving for this externally pretty life. But the truth is that only comes through a deep personal relationship with Jesus. And you're going to see that from a guy by the name of Jacob in the Bible today. If you don't know Jacob's story, this grandson of Abraham, son of Isaac, I'll just remind you a little bit of what the Bible book of Genesis has said about Jacob. He, as a young man, was a liar. He was a cheat. He was a thief. He would stab you in the back to get ahead in life. Until one day, Jacob met Jesus. And Jacob started wrestling with Jesus. And after that day was over with, Jacob is a different man. And now Jacob is about to pack up everyone in his family and move them to a new country and a new culture. But Jacob is already a new man on the inside. So this move is not really that big of a deal. We're going to look at what real, satisfying, deeply enriching life. We're going to look at what abundant life looks like, and we're going to see it from Genesis chapter 47. And I'll just tell you right up front that life is far more than just living in a nice house. Take it from a guy, listen to these numbers, who moved more than 22 times before finishing high school. I lived in cities, in different neighborhoods. On an average school year, I moved 2 or 3 times a school year. Before I joined the Army at 18, I had moved more often than most people that spend 30 years in the military. And here's what I learned along the way. It doesn't matter what house, it doesn't matter what town you live in. You could live in the most expensive house in America. It is a prison if it's not built with love. Yeah, it's a really nice prison. It's a really shiny prison, but it's still a prison nonetheless if love isn't the center of that house. And Jacob is about to move to a new house, a radically, totally different house. But he's going to have his son, and he's also going to have the Son of God going with him. Genesis 47, we're going to start reading in verse 1, and I just want to show you a little bit about what real, deeply satisfying, in Jesus' own words, what super abundant life looks like today. Because it goes like this. Genesis chapter 47, verse 1. So Joseph went to inform Pharaoh, my father Jacob and my brothers with their flocks and herds and all that they own have come down from the land of Canaan and are now in the land of Goshen. He took 5 of his brothers. I guess he didn't want the other 7 of those, the other 6 of those morons to go meet Pharaoh. He took 5 of his brothers with them to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh asked his brothers, what is your occupation? Now, Joseph has already prepared his brothers for this question. So they said to Pharaoh, your servants, both we and our ancestors, are shepherds. And they said to Pharaoh, we have come to stay in the land for a while because there's no grazing in the land for your servant sheep, since the famine in the land of Canaan has been severe. So now, please, let your servants settle in the land of Goshen. The Bible is describing for us right now how Jacob packs up and moves his 12 children from one country to another. Now, if you're wondering if that's an accurate number, Jacob already has 1 son in Egypt, but he still has 11 sons and 1 daughter, and all of their children, all of their grandchildren, are going to pack up in a caravan, and they're all going to Egypt, and they're going to Egypt for a better life. But God is already preparing the way. In fact, what we've just learned is God's been preparing the way for this move for more than 20 years because God sent a son ahead of Jacob to prepare for Jacob's arrival in Egypt. God sent Joseph, Jacob's son, ahead. But God also sent his son ahead of Jacob to prepare for Egypt. And I just want to remind you, it doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter what your home is. I said it last week. If you go to another place for any other reason, another city, another neighborhood, another house, if you go to another country, you're absolutely out of your mind if you go for any other reason. Then Jesus is leading us there. Jesus is going before us, and Jesus is preparing the way. And that's what's going on right here. Jacob is a shepherd, and a shepherd has to have grazing lands for his sheep. And this famine is so severe all over the world that my sheep are going to die, and then my family is going to die. If we stay in my homeland, we've got to pack up, and we've got to go to another country. And Jacob is going to lead his family through a cataclysmic change. Like, things will never, ever be the same again for Jacob. Quite literally, he's going to die in Egypt. Guys, can I just challenge you for a minute? Jacob is ready to do whatever it takes, following Jesus' leadership, to do whatever it takes to take care of his family. And guys, you should have the same attitude as Jacob. If you have to move to the opposite side of the universe, then that's what it takes to provide for your family and to protect your family, because that is what God has called men to do for their families. And it drives me absolutely nuts to see a guy laying on the couch playing PlayStation while his family suffers. I want to say, get off of the couch, put down the controller, and get out there and start providing for your family, because if you don't, they're going to die in the desert like Jacob's children and grandchildren would have. And Jacob was one of those guys that said, whatever I have to do, even if it means moving to a new country, I'll go there. But I need to make sure that God is the one moving me. I'm not just going there because of a better job opportunity. Look, you can buy a super nice house in the mountains and put all of your money and all of your time and energy into this family home that you're going to retire in. But if you're not careful, when the rains and the waters from Hurricane Helen come in, that house turns into nothing but sticks. You can buy this beautiful beach house where all of everybody in the world who sees it wishes that they had the view that you had out of your living room, until the winds and the storm surge from Milton pound against it. And Jesus uses this language. If you build your house on anything other than the rock, anything other than Him, it's all just sticks and boards. In fact, I'll take it a step further. Psalm 127 verse 1 puts it this way: anybody who builds a house on anything other than the Lord, when you labor to build that house, you labor in vain, unless the Lord is the centerpiece of that house. And that's why any house, even the most expensive house in America, turns into a prison, unless Jesus is at the center of the house and the house is built out of love. Jacob's moving to a new house in a new land and an entirely new country, and Jacob's going to have a new job when he gets there. And a better job is waiting for him in Egypt. And it's going to be a lot better because there's crops in Egypt. But can we be real for just a second? Jacob's got it made in the shade because he's in good with the boss of Egypt right now. And who is the boss of Egypt? It's his son Joseph, not Pharaoh, it's Joseph. So Jacob, it should be pretty easy for you from here on out, right? Listen to the conversation between Jacob and Pharaoh now, starting in verse 5. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, now that your father and brothers have come to you, the land of Egypt is open before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best parts of the land. Pause for just a second and think about what Pharaoh is saying. Imagine that you get an invite to travel to London, England tomorrow, and King George III says, of my entire empire, the entire British Commonwealth, any job you want, any land you want, any house you want, it's all yours. Pick whatever you want. That's exactly what Pharaoh is offering to Jacob right now. And they can live in the land of Goshen because that's the best grazing land on earth right now. And if you know any capable men among them, put them in charge of my livestock. I'll not just give you a house to live in and land to graze your sheep on. I'll even give you a great job. Can you imagine what this felt like for Jacob when he gets this unprecedented offer from Pharaoh? And if you're paying attention to the Bible right now, you should be asking, why would Pharaoh do this for Jacob? Pharaoh doesn't know Jacob. He doesn't owe Jacob anything. Why would Pharaoh be willing to make this unprecedented offer to a guy that he doesn't know and has never met? And you cannot come away with another answer than Pharaoh's heart is already warmed towards Jacob because of his son. I want to go back for a second to that moment when Joseph is a prisoner in the dungeon, accused of rape, and Joseph stands before Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says, not only am I going to release you from prison, but I am going to put you in charge of everything. Literally, everything in my kingdom is under your control. Only me and my family that's the only part that's not going to be under your control. Can you imagine if you were standing there listening to that conversation? The Bible doesn't tell us what other people thought about this, but I don't need the Bible to say it because I know people. And I already know that there's some old men in the room that are saying, hold on just a second, Pharaoh, are you kidding me? I've served you for all of these years, and you're going to put this young guy, this guy who doesn't know anything, in charge? There's some guys that are very loyal to Pharaoh, very faithful to Pharaoh, that are going to say, you're going to put this guy who hasn't been tested. We don't even know if we can trust him. You're going to put this guy in charge of all of Egypt. There's going to be some people in the crowd that are going to say, yo, Pharaoh, this guy is a foreigner. Or in our language, he ain't from around here. He doesn't speak our language. He doesn't know our culture. This guy doesn't even worship our gods. And you're going to put him in charge of me, in charge of the land. And you got to ask the question, more than 20 years before this moment, it is Joseph that prepares Pharaoh's heart for Jacob. But what prepared Pharaoh's heart for Joseph? And you can't come away with that answer for anything other than God was working already behind the scenes in Pharaoh's heart, so that when Joseph stood before him, Pharaoh said, "There's our guy. We're going to give him control over everything in the land of Egypt." Proverbs 22 says that the heart of the king is like a stream of water, verse 1, in the Lord's hands. And you know where a stream goes? A stream goes wherever God directs the stream to go. The stream doesn't even decide where the stream goes. And the book of Proverbs is saying, just like a stream of water, Pharaoh's heart goes wherever God directs it. So by the time that Joseph shows up, Pharaoh's already ready for Joseph. And over the last 10 years or so, Joseph has been getting Pharaoh ready for Jacob. And by the time that they show up, now Pharaoh's ready to give them the best houses, the best land. I'll even give you a great job, and you can take care of my animals while you're here, and I'll pay you some good money. And again, anybody who moves across town, let alone across cultures and countries for a better job, is absolutely crazy unless God is already preparing the way for you. Ladies, some of you out there are going to meet a guy, and he has bold ambition. He is intense about where he would like to see his career go. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, I want to tell you that a God-honoring career, doesn't even matter what it is, a career that works hard and that serves God and makes the world a better place, that career is awesome. But a guy who's willing to sacrifice their convictions, even sacrifice their values just for a little promotion, ladies, be careful. Because that guy who's willing to make those kind of sacrifices today might be willing to sacrifice his marriage or his children for a promotion tomorrow. And unless the Lord builds the house, anybody who builds it labors in vain. Unless the Lord directs the king's heart is not going to be warmed towards Pharaoh or towards Joseph, not going to be ready for Jacob. What you have right here is God giving them a place to live and a great job, but he gives them more than that. God gives Jacob what almost everybody on planet Earth seems to want. God gives him health and long life. God gives Jacob age as well as prosperity. If you had to choose one, and you could only choose one of the two options, and you had to choose between living a long life or living a short but full life, if you could only choose one of those two, which of the two would you take? Because listen to the life that God has given to Jacob. As Jacob has a conversation with Pharaoh. Starting in verse 7, Joseph then brought his father Jacob and presented him to Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Say the word blessed out loud. That's important, so important, the Bible's going to mention it again. Jacob blessed Pharaoh, and Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many years have you lived?" And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "My pilgrimage has lasted 130 years. My years have been few and hard." And you and I are saying, hold on, 130 years? And he's saying, compared to my family, that's a really short life. My years have been few and hard, and they have not reached the years of my ancestors during their pilgrimage. So here it is again. Jacob blessed Pharaoh and then departed from Pharaoh's presence. Does it bother you that Jacob, this faithful follower of Jesus, blesses Pharaoh, this foreign king, this idol-worshiping country leader? Does it bother you that Jacob would pray to God on his behalf? Because that's what the Bible is saying here. In fact, I read some commentaries this week, and they're trying to argue it's actually not praying for Pharaoh to have a good life. Jacob is just doing a greeting, a blessing of greeting. No, it's not. That's not at all what this passage is saying. Jacob is asking God to be good to Pharaoh. And Jacob is asking God to bless Pharaoh. And I don't know if that bothers you or not, but it shouldn't if you remember our challenge from God. It's not actually a challenge, it's a command. And God has told us, while I've got you here in this second city, you belong to the first city, you belong to the eternal city, but while I've got you here in this second city, this earthly city, don't forget the people around you. In fact, we challenged you at the start of 2024, church, would you pray these words from Jeremiah chapter 29? Would you pursue the good in your city? And would you pray to God on the city's behalf? Because the book of Jeremiah says it this way: when the city thrives, then you're going to thrive. And I think Jacob recognized that and said, I need Pharaoh to thrive. I need Egypt to thrive. If I'm going to live and my family's going to be successful in Egypt, I need them to thrive if I'm going to thrive. But I think it's fascinating that Jacob says, I lived a short life. I lived a hard life. In fact, as I read this passage, it occurs to me, Abraham, Isaac, had some hard knocks during their days. You keep reading in the Bible, and you're going to read that Joseph has some hard knocks, and John the Baptist has some hard days in front of him, and Jesus goes through some hard days in front of them. And if Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, if Joseph and John the Baptist and Jesus have a hard life, how could you or I expect anything less from God than it might be hard, but Jesus has promised, don't worry, I will be right there with you. In fact, I'll be there with you in the middle of the difficulties. So I'm going to ask you again, would you rather have a long life or would you rather have a full life? Because you might not be able to have both. And what Jacob is saying here is, compared to my parents and grandparents, I'm a young man and it has been nothing but hard. I've been fighting with my brother Esau. I've been fighting with my father-in-law Laban. I've been fighting with my own children, and I'm still fighting today, and it never lets up for me. But you know what? Jesus has been with me all along the way. So personally, that one's an easy one for me. I would rather die a young, painful, violent death and be able to say I had a full life than be an old man, 99 years old, with dribble coming down my chin, and all I did my whole life is try to make it to 100. That's not really living. Listen, a great home doesn't equal a great life. And a great job doesn't equal a great life. And even living long doesn't equal a great life. And I'll ratchet it up once. I'll tell you that even having the basic necessities, just having food on the table, that doesn't equal a great life. Yeah, you got to have food on the table to live, but just having food on the table doesn't equal a life. One of my favorite baseball players of all times played for the Atlanta Braves for just a few seasons. Deion Sanders is one of my favorite baseball players. In fact, go back and look at the way that Deion Sanders played baseball in the playoffs, and you'll see not only was he a great baseball player, but in October, he was phenomenal. The only player in history, listen to this, to play two professional sports on the same day. Played with the Atlanta Falcons in the morning, and then played with the Atlanta Braves on their active roster in the afternoon. Deion Sanders is one of my favorite baseball players of all times. And at the height of his career, everybody in America knew about prime time. Deion Sanders had everything that life could offer you. He had all of the money. He had all of the fame. In fact, did you know that Deion Sanders wrote a book about his life? The title of the book is Money, Power, Sex. Here's what Deion Sanders says in the book. And this is one of the things that makes me like Deion Sanders, the man, not the ball player. At the height of his career, when he was making truckloads of money with the Atlanta Braves and the Atlanta Falcons, when he was uber successful, Deion Sanders was driving home from practice one day in Atlanta, going across the bridge, and he said, "That's it. I hate my life so much that I'm going to drive off of the bridge and I'm going to kill myself. I've got all of the money, all of the power, all of the sex that any man on the planet could want, and I'm totally miserable." And instead of driving off the bridge, he drove home. And he took a friend up on an offer to go meet personally with Bishop T.D. Jakes and sit down and talk to him. And Bishop Jakes, who wrote the foreword for this book, introduced Deion Sanders to Jesus. And in this book, Deion Sanders said, "I had money, I had power, I had sex, but I didn't know what real life was. Not until I met Jesus." And Jesus puts it in these terms in the book of John. Jesus says, John chapter 10, verse 10, "The thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy, but I came to give you life." And then Jesus uses this phrase, "I came to give you super abundant life." We don't even have a word in the English language to translate what Jesus just said. It is longer life than you can possibly come up with on your own. It is better life, quality and quantity. I came to give you far more than you could ever humanly accomplish on your own. And it's all waiting for you when you turn to me. And Deion Sanders is the perfect example. No one was more successful at the prime of Primetime's life than him. And he was totally miserable until he found Jesus. And if you listen to Deion Sanders talk today, he will tell you, "I am a very different man after that conversation with Bishop Jakes, because now I live for something more than a house or cars or job or food on the table or even a long life. I got something bigger than that I'm living for." And today, maybe you need to start living for something bigger. In fact, today, maybe somebody listening needs to experience this abundant life, this new life that Jesus offers for the first time. And maybe today is a challenge to stop living for what everybody else is living for and start living for the glory of God this week. But I am challenging all of us who have been bought by the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ. Will you offer life to somebody who's trying to work the job and earn the paycheck and have all of the shiny things on the inside that the world offers, but they're going to end up completely disillusioned, totally dissatisfied if they don't find life in Jesus?
Thank you for watching today's broadcast from Jeff Struecker. To learn more about Jeff and his mission to guide men and their families into a real, rugged, and relentless faith in King Jesus, go to jeffstruecker.com.